Welcome, friends, to this course on Vedic Science and Technology. Let me first tell you that this course is going to introduce foundational concepts of Vedic science from the perspective of Vedas, Upanishads, and ancillary texts to explore correlations between Vedic insights and modern science, to understand time, space, matter, and energy through Vedic and scientific frameworks, to encourage critical thinking, comparative analysis, and philosophical reflection on the nature of reality. And the outcomes of this course will be as under. By the end of the course, the learners will be able to interpret key Vedic mantras related to science in their original Sanskrit with meanings, explain Vedic concepts of creation, structure, and dissolution of the universe, compare Vedic time cycles with astronomical and cosmological scales. They will be able to analyze the concept of matter, energy, and motion in the Nyaya, Vaisheshik, and Sankhya system. They will be able to appreciate the philosophical depth and the scientific symbolism of Vedic cosmology. So, friends, today's lecture we have a very exciting theme to discuss, and it is Vedic science and the Western discourse on science. When we talk about Western science, we often trace it back to Greeks, later reshaped by the Renaissance and great scientific revolution. The focus there was largely on understanding nature in order to control it and transform society through technology. But if we shift to the Vedic tradition, the approach is very different. Science here is not only about material progress, but also about understanding the process of creation, attaining Abhyudaya. Abhyudaya means the material well-being, and Nisreyasaha, the ultimate transformation of human being. It's a spiritual elevation. So, from the very outset, you see the contrast. Western science leans towards external mastery, while Vedic science integrates both the material and the spiritual dimensions of life. It gives more importance to the spiritual dimensions of life over to the material one. In Western science, the method of inquiry is strongly empirical. Thinkers like Francis Bacon and Isaac Newton laid the foundations. Observation, experimentation, and hypothesis testing became the cornerstones. You observe a phenomenon, you test it, you verify it. This is how the modern physics, chemistry, and biology grew. Now, how does the Vedic tradition compare? Interestingly, Vedic thought too values observation, but it doesn't stop there. Knowledge is validated through multiple means: pratyaksha or direct perception, anuman, inference, upaman or analogy, abhav or absence, and shabda praman, the statement of a seer or the Shastras. Oh, and beyond all this, the yogis emphasized experiential realization, what they called yogic pratyaksha. So while Western science confines itself to the laboratory experiments, Vedic science expands the scope, blending empirical observation with intuition, with realization, inference, and spiritual insight. When we turn to rationalism, the West highlights figures like Rene Descartes and Galileo. They insisted on the supremacy of reason and mathematics in explaining the natural world. The universe, to them, was like a grand machine that could be decoded mathematically. In India, too, the reason has been given an honored place. The Nyaya Darshan is a complete system dedicated to logic and reasoning. The entire framework of inference, pratijna, hetu, udaharana, upanay, and nigaman ensures that knowledge is acquired systematically. In fact, what Descartes and Galileo sought to establish in Europe, the Nyaya philosophers had already explored centuries earlier. So both traditions respected reason, but Nyaya tied it closely to the pursuit of human transformation, liberation, not just material discovery. In fact, Nyaya also went further and classified different kinds of reasons or hetus. For example, Sadhya Sama Hetu, where the reason is inherent, like saying fire is hot, or Anuplabdhi Hetu, that is known perception, such as there is no pot on the floor because I don't see one, or Kriya Hetu, using an effect to infer a cause, like smoke indicates fire. Then you have Samavaya Hetu, inherence based reasoning, and Visheshana Hetu, where a specific characteristics is used to establish a point. In fact, Nyaya even discusses faulty reasoning, Hitvabhasa, that is known as Hitvabhasa, like inconclusive reasons, contradictory reasons, or unestablished claims. Doesn't this remind you of the modern logic classes or even today's critical thinking courses? The ancient Indian thinkers had already mapped these ideas millennia ago. In other words, we can say the modern system has evolved based upon the Vedic system. As highlighted in the previous slide, I may give a detailed view here. Nyaya Darshan classifies Hetu into 5 types based on their validity in reasoning. Number 1, Sadhyasam, Swabhav Hetu. The reason is inherently related to the proposition, just like fire is hot. Anuplabdhi Hetu, non perception as a ground for inference. For example, there is no pot on the floor because I do not see one. Number 3 is Karya Hetu, effect as the reason for inferring the cause. For example, smoke indicates fire. Samvaya Hetu, inherence based reasoning. Sound is eternal because it is quality of space. Visheshana Hetu, a specific characteristics used to establish the point. Similarly, Nyaya also identifies fallacious hetus, hetvabhas, known as hetvabhas or faulty reasoning, which do not lead to valid conclusions. These include Sa Vyabichara, inconclusive reason. Number two, Viruddha, contradictory reasoning. Sata Pratipaksha, disputed reason. And number fourth, Asiddha, unestablished reason. And number five, Badhita, negated reason. In Western science, reductionism is a very central feature. To study something complex, scientists break it down into its smaller components. If you want to study the body, you focus on cells, then molecules, then atoms. This is useful but also limiting because life is more than just molecules. Moreover, it is not necessary that by knowledge of parts we can reach the knowledge of the whole. It is like the story of the 5 blind persons who went to understand the structure of an elephant. The story goes like this. Once upon a time, 5 blind men heard that a strange, enormous animal called an elephant had been brought to their town. None of them had ever encountered such a creature, so out of curiosity, they decided to know what an elephant was by touching it. The first blind man happened to touch the elephant's leg. Feeling its firm, round, and pillar like form, he declared, "The elephant is like a strong tree trunk." The second blind man touched the elephant's tail. It felt thin and flexible in his mind. He exclaimed, "The elephant is like a rope." The third man touched the elephant's ear, feeling the broad, thin, flapping surface. He argued, "The elephant is like a big fan." The fourth blind man placed his hand on the elephant's side. Finding it wide, flat, and solid, he asserted, "The elephant is like a wall." The fifth blind man felt the elephant's trunk, experiencing its muscular flexibility and the movement. He insisted, "Elephant is like a snake." Each man was convinced of his own perception and argued vehemently against the others. Since each had grasped only a part of the elephant, none could comprehend the whole. The dispute grew heated, but no conclusion was reached. Then, after 5 blind men quarreled endlessly, a man with a sight came along. Observing their dispute, he calmly explained, "Each of you is right, but only partially. The elephant is not merely a pillar, nor a rope, nor a wall, nor a fan, nor a snake. It is a large living creature that has all features embedded in it. What you touched was true, but incomplete." Hearing this, the blind men realized that their partial knowledge was valid but limited, and that truth in its wholeness transcends the reach of their isolated perceptions. The story distinguished between the partial and the holistic knowledge, partial knowledge versus holistic knowledge. The story shows that knowing only parts of reality does not necessarily provide knowledge of the whole. Each blind man had a fragment of truth but mistook it for the complete truth. It illustrates the limitation of pratyaksha praman, direct perception. Sense organs may reveal aspects of reality, but without synthesis, they cannot reveal the totality. So each blind man may clung dogmatically to his own partial truth, leading to the conflict. Similarly, sectarianism in philosophy, religion, or science often arises when a partial view is absolutized. This story can also be used to highlight the difference between reductionism, understanding by parts, and holism, understanding the whole as more than sum of the parts. In this story, the elephant represents truth or reality. The blind men represent limited human perspectives. Their arguments represent the disputes of philosophers, scientists, or theologians when they absolutize a partial insight. By contrast, Vedic science takes a holistic view. Ayurveda and yoga do not separate body, mind, and soul. They see them, they see them as interconnected. If a person is ill, Ayurveda doesn't ask which organ is malfunctioning. It asks what is the imbalance in the person's whole system: diet, lifestyle, mental state, environment. This is the difference. Western science analyzes by breaking down, Vedic science integrates by looking at a whole. Moreover, the Vedic system is not confined to the material world only. It also deals with the spiritual world, and the spiritual world cannot be understood through reductionism. That is why Yajnavalkya in Vrihadaranyaka says, Tasmin Vidyate Sarvam Idam Vidyatam Bhavati. If we are able to know him, everything becomes known. In modern system in the West, science grew alongside universities, academies, and research institutions. Over time, this created a formal and professional structure for knowledge. Scholars, journals, peer reviews, laboratories. Knowledge was no longer just for a few individuals, but part of an organized system. And it is not so easy to get into that organized system. This is entirely based upon money. If you have money, if you have something to pay, you can enter into that system. Now compare this with the Vedic world. Learning was centered around gurukulas, ashramas, and Vidyapeethas. Knowledge was transmitted in small, intimate settings between guru and disciple. The emphasis was not on degrees or publications, but was on deep transformation of students' character and consciousness. It was not about applications. In the West, discovery quickly moved into yantric machines, industries, technologies. But in Vedic tradition, discoveries were often applied in mantric and tantric settings also, in addition to the yantric forms, with Ayurveda, yoga, and naturopathy being prime examples. So we see both civilizations institutionalized knowledge, but in a very different ways. When we talk about knowledge itself, the Western tradition insists that it is primarily empirical. It must be based upon observation, experimentation, reasoning. Karl Popper adds the idea of falsifiability. If a theory cannot be disproved, it is not scientific. Thomas Kuhn later speaks about paradigm shifts, revolutions in science, when old models are replaced by new ones. But Vedic epistemology is richer and wider. It accepts empirical knowledge, yes, but also Shabda Pramana, the knowledge from authoritative Shastras, the Shastras composed by seers, and yogic Pratyaksha, knowledge gained through Samadhi, inner realization by a yogi. So while Western science confines knowledge to external observation, the Vedic model embraces both the external and the internal dimensions of reality. In short, Western science looks outward. Vedic science looks both outward and inward. Here lies one of the sharpest contrasts. Both modern science and Vedic science have objectives. Western science, by and large, seeks to understand and control nature. The aim is technological progress, material comfort, economic growth. It rarely addresses the larger purpose of life. In Vedic thought, science is not separate from philosophy or spirituality. The ultimate aim is Atma Vidya or human transformation, self realization. The material world, yes, but also the alignment of human existence with Rita, that is, cosmic order. A human being is seen as part of nature, not above it. So, where the West seeks to control our nature, the Vedic vision seeks harmony with it. This is a profound difference in the purpose. In Western science, the worldview is largely materialistic. Reality is matter and energy, governed by physical laws. Consciousness, if discussed at all, is seen as a byproduct of the brain, a kind of chemical accident. But Vedic science presents a more layered view. It acknowledges both material and non material realities. Brahman, the ultimate consciousness, is the efficient cause of the universe. Prakriti is the material cause, and Jiva, the soul, is the simple cause, carrying karmic impressions. Reality is not just atoms colliding in empty space, but a grand interplay of the consciousness and the matter. So while the West says consciousness emerges from matter, the Vedic view says consciousness and matter are coextensive, and creation takes place when matter or energy is agitated by the sankalp of consciousness. This reversal is crucial to understanding the difference in worldviews. In Western science, the dominant model is the Big Bang Theory. Creation begins with an explosion of energy expanding into space and time, giving rise to stars, galaxies, and eventually life. In Vedic cosmology, creation begins not with a bang but with tamasa, means dark energy, also known as dormant state of energy agitated by Brahman. The material space, known as Bhutakash, forms, and motion begins only when infused with Chetana, consciousness. In Vedic science, there are two types of spaces. One is Bhutakash, which is eternal, exists always, known as the space of Brahman. And another is material space or bhutakas, which is not eternal. It comes into existence with the motion into energy infused by Brahman, and then it ends up with the dissolution of universe. It is fascinating, isn't it? Both traditions speak of an initial state of energy and transformation. But while the West leaves no place for consciousness, the Vedic account places consciousness at the very heart of cosmology. Einstein taught us that time and space are inseparable, a single fabric called space-time, born at the moment of the Big Bang. This has become the bedrock of modern physics. Vedic science, however, treats time and space as distinct. The Vaisheshika system of philosophy enumerates them separately. Moreover, the Vedic text speaks of two kinds of species, Chidakash, the still eternal consciousness space, and Bhutakas, the gross material space that arises when dark energy, means Prakriti, is agitated by Brahman as a natural cyclic course. This is profound. In the West, time and space are physical dimensions. In the Vedic tradition, space can also be conscious. It is not just a container for objects, but a living reality in itself. So far as life and evolution is concerned, in Western science, Darwinian evolution explains life as the outcome of random mutations and natural selection. Species change gradually, adapting to their environments, and those best suited survive. It is purely a biological, materialistic account of life. The Vedic perspective is very different. Life is not random but karmic sanskaras, result of the karmas done in the past lives or past creation cycles. The sanskaras are the impressions carried by soul. They guide the form and journey of life. They act as the seed for the next life. Vedanta philosopher says, Sanskara bijata srishti. These sanskaras are the seed of human beings for their next lives. Just like a seed of a tree contains the information of the future tree, and when it is grown and when it receives the conducive atmosphere, then the same tree comes out of that seed, the information of which it contained. Similarly, sanskaras are the information of our future life embedded into the stall body of the soul, and this stall body always travels with the soul. Evolution in Vedic science is described in terms of panchakoshas, or the 5 levels of consciousness. The first one is Annamaya kosha, or the level of consciousness, where the consciousness remains in dormant state. The plant life is described by the Annamaya level. The next kosha is a Pranamaya kosha, or we may say Pranamaya level, where the microorganisms takes birth. Then third one is the manomaya level. The macroorganisms like animals, birds, they take birth at manomaya level. Mind, mana. What is mana? Man is described as the connection of desire with the prana. When desire gets connected with the prana or the vital life, then the mind arises. The fifth one is known as Vijnanamaya level of consciousness, the intellectual level. And at this level, the bodies of human beings, they get developed. And the finally is known as Annamaya Kosha, the level of bliss, where the spiritually elevated human beings live, or enlightened human beings live, or the divine human beings we may call, they live. In simple terms, I can say the level of yogis and seers is known as Anandamaya Kosha, the level of Anandamaya Kosha. Evolution is thus not just biological in Vedic science but a spiritual, moving toward higher states of consciousness. When we look at the area of medicine and health, we find modern science or modern medicine in the West is largely biochemical. Diseases are treated with pharmaceuticals and surgery. The body is often seen as a machine. Fix the part and the system works again. But Ayurveda and yogic sciences emphasize balance. Health is a harmony of Vata, Pitta and Kapha. Prevention is considered more important than cure. Daily routine, dincharya, seasonal discipline, ritucharya, and practices like diet, meditation, and pranayama are central. Where Western medicine focuses on symptoms, Ayurveda asks what imbalance in lifestyle, diet, or mental state caused the disease in the first place. This integrative, preventive approach is something modern integrative health sciences are beginning to rediscover today. When we view at ethics and sustainability, we find in modern Western model, science and technology often prioritize material growth and economic profit. This has certainly brought prosperity, but also environmental crisis, climate change, and social imbalances. Because we want to exploit nature maximum for our comfort and benefits. We have no idea of preserving it. In contrast, the Vedic worldview emphasizes dharma, moral and ecological responsibility. Nature or prakriti is sacred. Human beings are not separate from nature but part of it. To disrupt ecological balance is to violate Rita, the cosmic order. Science, therefore, is not value free in Vedic thought. It is guided by ethics and principles of sustainability. Finally, let us reflect on the relationship between science and religion. In Western model, they are often seen as opposing forces. Science deals with facts and religion deals with faith. They cannot reconcile. They cannot be reconciled at any cost. In the Vedic tradition, however, dharma and science are complementary. In Vedic model, there is no place of religion, but dharma is there, and dharma is different from religion. Dharma means knowledge, moral, ethical values, set of moral, ethical values, responsibility of human beings towards their own self, towards their families, society, nations, prakriti, ecology, all sorts of responsibilities. That is known as dharma. So in Vedic tradition, dharma and science are complementary. Both are paths of knowledge, one directed outward to the material world, the other inward to the spiritual world. They supplement one another rather than contradict. This holistic approach prevents fragmentation of human knowledge, keeping science tied to values, ethics, responsibilities, and ultimate purpose. So, as we conclude, what have we learned? The Western discourse on science is no doubt powerful, empirical, experimental, rational, reductionist, and institutionalized, but it often neglects the larger questions of consciousness, ethics, and ultimate purpose. Vedic science, on the other hand, does not separate knowledge from wisdom. It seeks both abhyodaya, worldly well being, and nishreyasa, spiritual liberation. It integrates material progress with self realization, always keeping the human being aligned with cosmic order. That is why the Shastra says, Jnanam sa Vijnanam sa ya Ved Ubhayam Saha. In today's age of environmental crisis and mental health challenges, perhaps the synthesis of these two traditions, the rigor of Western science and the wisdom of Vedic science, is what the world truly needs. In fact, the Western science needs the help of Vedic science for its integrative and holistic growth. Thanks.